We need you down here.
What's the status?
Agitation spike. Doc says it won't wait till morning.
Copy.
I'm on my way.
The first ring cut through the ward like a cold finger drawn along the spine. Fluorescence hummed. Monitors blinked in their own private languages. Outside, dust moved under the floodlights in slow tides, as if the night were breathing. Staff Sergeant Elias Moreno lifted his head from a chart and frowned at the old hardline phone mounted on the corner of the nurses' station. The green display glowed with two words that shouldn't have existed. Ward 19. Elias glanced at the empty corridor, then at the comm specialist hunched over his radio console. Staff Sergeant Caldwell shook his head without looking. There was no Ward 19. Not on the map. Not on the daily brief. Not in the building that had been carved out of a Soviet hangar and patched with Western gear and improvised miracles. Ward numbers began at 20. They ran forward like a neat stack of ration cards. 19 was a rumor from the old-timers and the cleaners. The sealed wing, the fire, the oxygen that turned flames into a dragon and a corridor into a memory. The phone rang again. Elias picked it up and said his name out of habit, the syllables steady because they had to be. On the other end, a woman's voice came fast and trained. British, barely above a whisper. We're drowning. Blue turning black. Red needs O negative. Room 19. Please. Kira Shaw, the British nurse with a paper crane tattoo tucked under her wrist cuff, stepped out from the shadow of Bay 2 and froze. Her eyes went to the handset, then the screen. Caldwell finally looked up. His cynicism fell away. Something older stepped into his face. You're calling from what room did you say? Elias asked, even though he already knew. Room 19. The voice shook and held itself together by force. We've got 8. 1 expectant. Where are you? Why aren't you? Listen, the oxygen. Turn off the oxygen cascade at 211 or you'll lose the whole wing. Do you hear me? Do you? Static swallowed her. A stuttering cough from the diesel generator rippled through the floor. The air seemed to drop half a degree. Elias lowered the handset. Captain Hendricks, the chief medic, leaned into the light at the end of the nurse's station with arms folded and a face that could command triage with 3 words. Who is calling at midnight? She asked. Ward 19, Kira said. Her voice was calm, brittle as glass. Hendricks shook her head. There was no 19. Somewhere, deep in the bones of the building, a door nobody used creaked without moving. The phone rang a 3rd time. In that ordinary sound, the impossible set its bags down and waited to be noticed. Setup. The hospital was the kind you build in a place where everything is temporary and somehow still has to work. Role 2 enhanced, they called it on paper. 2 operating theaters, a small ICU, basic imaging, blood bank, dental, lab, pharmacy. Enough to catch the bleeding and buy time, not enough to pretend you were home. Its skin was a faceted Soviet-era hangar poured in unforgiving concrete. Its interior was a Western maze of drywall, clean linoleum, and whiteboards that collected bad nights like scars. On quiet shifts, you could stand at one end of the long corridor and see heat rippling off the polished floor, as if the desert outside breathed through hairline cracks. It had a welded door at the far end that nobody liked. A single strip of paint, scrubbed thin by time, still whispered, "No entry," in 2 languages. The cleaners swore the air moved differently in that corridor. The electricians avoided the breaker labeled East Utility. Even though nothing on the new plan called itself East anymore, if you pressed your palm to the concrete near the dead door when the generator ramped, you could feel a tremor like breath. Elias had been on nights for 6 months. He had learned to carry his fatigue the way you carry a child through a crowd. Firmly, apologetically, with humor. He had joined the army because discipline was a good place to store the rage he didn't know how to translate. He had stayed because he discovered his hands could keep people from dying. And once you know that, you don't walk away. He was 31, slim enough to slip between gurneys without touching them, with eyes that cataloged quickly and forgot nothing he wished he could. Under his scrub top, a small scar on his ribs ached in cold air when an inbound helicopter pushed a wedge of night under the roof. Kira Shaw had arrived 2 months after him, England stamped on her vowels and oil under her nails from too many flights. She was a veteran of British MIRT, the helicopter teams that dropped into chaos and left it tidier and more alive. She wore her hair hewn short and secure as a promise. She had the precise, teasing gallows humor of someone for whom death was not hypothetical and not always victorious. Caldwell's radio desk looked like a cockpit. He'd taped a rosary inside his left pocket when he'd arrived and never told anyone. In his other pocket, he kept a tiny list of things he would do when he went home, most of which involved kitchens that stayed stocked and a bed that stayed in one place. Captain Hendricks kept her hair cropped tight and her eyes soft. She built order out of noise. She counted and counted again, in a place where entropy put in for overtime. She had the audacity to expect competence and human decency. Colonel Rosen was the surgeon who ran the place. In daylight, he looked like he belonged in some Boston hospital, where people lined up to tell him their diets and trust him with their chests. At night, out here, he was all will and tendon, and the thin membrane of control that holds a system together. He had a reputation for giving away his coffee and hoarding his patients. Padre Utley, the chaplain, was a tall, sleepy-eyed man with a voice like a sweater. He knew the prayers of 3 faiths and a dozen footnotes in between. He kept the kettle full because tea was faster than absolution. He polished the brass plate by his door himself. It bore 2 names in a neat serif font: Lieutenant Jenna Park, nurse; Sergeant Mahmoud Amini, anesthetist. The date was a decade and change ago. The story was older than the dust. The story went like this. Years earlier, when the concrete still smelled like snow from the men who poured it, the hospital had a different interior plan. The wards had numbers that made sense in Soviet and then in someone else's language. The oxygen system had been refitted. The pipes flashed new and bright. Then rockets fell, as rockets do. One burst near the east wall. A second came through the roof of the ward labeled 19. The ceiling collapsed. Oxygen fed fire like a god you never should have appeased. Jenna stayed, they said, to get one more patient out. Mahmud stood by the valve that refused to turn fast enough. The wing burned blue. After, they welded the doors and renamed everything like renaming a child after a nightmare. 19 disappeared. The map never showed it again. Elias had liked Jenna without needing to explain why. She had trained him on the nocturnal dance of supply rooms and checklists. She had a way of saying, "You're all right," that made him believe it long enough to become it. When she died, he had been on leave. The guilt of absence perched in his chest and refused to be shooed. A cracked plastic badge with her photo and name had ended up in a bin months later. He fished it out and hung it on a hook by the medroom door like a prayer he didn't admit to. That night before midnight had been quiet by their standards. A soldier with a bad cough, convinced it was worse. A local interpreter's father, with a blood sugar problem as old as his grief. Coffee brewed and went cold. Cards slapped on plastic and were gathered back. The ward exhaled. The lights hummed. The weld seam at the end of the hall pretended to be retired from anyone's story. The phone rang at 12:01. Elias answered. The British voice told him to shut off oxygen at 2:11 or lose the wing. The line died, like a breath sucked back into a mouth that no longer wanted to talk. Something shifted among the living. Reality bent a degree and then held, as if waiting to see if anyone noticed. Rising action. Elias looked down the long corridor to the welded door and saw nothing new. He felt something ancient. He set the receiver gently into its cradle. Hendricks watched him like a mathematician sees a problem assembling itself. Caldwell thumbed his radio with the defensive bravado of a man who preferred known voices to unknown ones. "We're not doing seances on my watch," he said, and then said nothing else, because he had heard it too, and there is a point past which bravado becomes the wrong tool. Elias picked up a flashlight. "I'm going down there," he said. He spoke as if he were telling someone what he would eat, because tone keeps fear sitting where you put it. "Take Shaw," Hendricks said. "Caldwell, wake Rosen. Let him know we have a glitch, and find Padre." They moved. The corridor deepened underfoot, the way perspective tricks you when you're tired. The further they walked, the older the walls felt. Paint aged 5 years in 10 meters. Conduit bent into angles that carpenters no longer favored. The air lost the faint scent of lemon cleaner and picked up the ghost of something burnt long ago and still present. At the end, the welded door waited, indifferent. Elias set his palm against its seam. It was cool. It vibrated faintly, harmonizing with the generator's song. Under that, something else, like a heartbeat in water. He swept the flashlight across the utility closet just before the welded door. Its metal panel door had a working housekeeper lock. It hummed like a quiet animal. He slipped the key from the ring that lived on a nail beside the mop sink. The closet door clicked open obediently. Buckets in solution, neatly lined. A mop leaned against the wall with the posture of a soldier at parade rest. Behind the shelves, an unpainted rectangle of wall absorbed the light. It should have thrown it back. It didn't. Kira slid her hand into the blackness. Her fingers vanished up to the first knuckle with no resistance. She jerked back, breath sharp, then laughed at herself because she was a professional. And what else do you do? "Do not like this," she said in a voice she used for helicopters in bad weather. It was half a joke and half a freestanding truth. They should have called Rosen. They should have barricaded the closet and waited for daylight and rational reports. They did not. They stepped through. Cold folded around them in a single sheet. Not winter, basement cold. Stored hours cold. Light smeared, then resolved. They stood in a corridor that no longer existed. Linoleum, antiseptic green. On one wall, lettering in Cyrillic half erased under a coat of beige. Overlaying it, painted English. Under both, the faint memory of Arabic stencils. Time layered like paint, each era insisting it had the last word. A door halfway down hummed faintly with electricity. The number over its lintel had been painted over and sanded and painted again. 19 glowed through like a bruise. The wired glass inset reflected their bodies in a way that felt like something else was trying to be reflected too. The phone ringing inside was an old thing sound, not digital, a bell impatient enough to call itself a voice. They went in. Room 19 was a ward paused mid-breath. 4 beds in line. Monitors swinging on articulated arms, their screens lit with green tracing, not connected to anyone. A crash cart tucked neatly under a fluorescent fixture that flickered with the fatigue of 1,000 hours. Curtains hung at angles that suggested they had once been ripped back by urgency and never righted. The smell was oxygen-rich. The memory of fire lived in it, like part of the paint. On the far counter, under a heap of folded linens that should not have been dusted with ash, a black phone gleamed. It rang and rang, as if sound could wear grooves in air. Kira reached it first and lifted the receiver, her breath steady to the count she used in flight. "Ward 19, she said. "Shaw." The voice was male, British Midlands. Surprise jagged his words. "Christ. I thought, listen, is there fire?" "The oxygen cascade. Who is this?" Kira asked, switching to the tone that wrenched answers out of chaos. "Corporal Howell. We called you ages ago. We've got 8. I said 8. Behind him, the clink of metal, the hiss of gas, someone coughing wet. "You're late." "What's your date?" Kira asked. It was muscle memory. Time is a coordinate when geography lies. Silence. Then, October 2008. "That's what they said. The fire is started, I think. We can smell it." Kira covered the mouthpiece with her hand and looked at Elias. He shook his head minutely. He wanted to say no. He had already stepped into yes. "Who is with you?" she asked. "Park," Howell said. "J. Park, American. Good with a mop as she is with a... Listen, she said if we didn't hear from you, to tell you, turn the oxygen off at 211 or it feeds it, and the... Static sheared the rest away. Elias lowered his flashlight and stared into the shallow depth of the room. A shape shifted in the periphery of his sight. He turned. A young man stood in the doorway, uniform wrong for any NATO coalition. Soviet-style webbing, a faded red star on a frayed sleeve. His skin was a pale clay color, eyes wide with a fear that had traveled too far to be dislodged. He clutched his left side and swayed. He said a word that sounded like brass dropped onto concrete. Pojalusta. He took 3 steps into the room and left bloody half-prints where he paused. He pointed to his own chest and rasped a word that crossed languages. Razor. He mimed lungs closing. Elias's body moved before his mind arrived. A tension pneumothorax is a story the body tells with certain grammar. Neck veins bulging, trachea shifted, breath shallow, eyes beginning that far look. There wasn't time to wonder why a Soviet orderly had stepped out of an old decade into a room that should not exist. There was only a man dying in a way Eli could fix. He yanked open the crash cart drawer. Code locks didn't exist here. The drawer slid with an old purr. He pulled a decompression needle, still sealed in packaging, yellowed by time. His fingers remembered the skin then pop of it, in a way that had nothing to do with dates. He looked the man in the eyes and nodded once. The man nodded back, desperate gratitude crushed under ribs. Elias found the second intercostal space with his fingers. He pierced the skin and listened for that sound. The hiss of air fleeing a trap. It came, a relief you could feel in your own bones. The man exhaled a sound that had started 40 years ago and only now had a place to go. His shoulders loosened. His eyes found Elias's face like they had been hunting for it through smoke. Kira's palm anchored the man's shoulder. She watched the numbers on the old monitor stutter, then march. She met Elias's eyes across the narrow bed. They should have been terrified. They were tired instead. They were in the pocket of a night that had decided to test all the assumptions and see which ones held. Something crashed in the corridor. A bed frame scraping tile. Somewhere, a wet cough became a scream and then faded as if swallowed by the wall. "We can't stay here," Kira said. "We have a ward to run." "We'll need to come back," Elias said. not sure if he meant it as wish or warning. The Soviet man caught his sleeve and spoke in a flood. Elias understood none of it. He understood everything. "Thank you. Don't leave me. Don't make this the only time anyone sees me." "Stay," Elias said, uselessly, and let go. They stepped back into the utility closet. When the world resumed its normal shape around them, Elias felt it like nausea fading. He shut the closet door and leaned the mop just so, the way it had been. He had a sudden, ridiculous thought that if the handle pointed the wrong way, the door would lock again and swallow the corridor forever. They returned to the nurse's station. Hendricks did not say, "I told you so." She didn't believe in wasting sentences. "Report," she said. Kira's voice was clinical. "Ward 19 exists and does not. The phone works. Time is wrong. We spoke to a British corporal from 2008. An American nurse named Park relayed a warning to shut off oxygen at 2:11. We performed a needle decompression on a Soviet-era orderly in that room. He improved. Caldwell's radio chose that moment to burst to life. Convoy South, IED. 11 casualties. Wait, 12. Multiple blast injuries. Medevac 5 minutes behind us. ETA 15. Rosen hustled out of his office with the back of his hand pressed briefly against his eye, a gesture of man refusing to rub sleep. "We're up," he said. His eyes flicked to the bank of oxygen dials. "What are we?" "Turn oxygen off in B-Wing at 2:11, Hendricks said without breaking stride. "We'll buy the consequences later. Eli, Kira, triage. Caldwell, alert blood bank. Prep 2 feeders. Padre on the floor now." The machine of night wound itself tight and spun. At the doors, headlights wheel arched through dust and became bodies. Wails braided with silence. Men and boys and 3 women lifted out of trucks and thrown into the catchment of fluorescent light, like debris from a tide. Smoke, blood, the specific stink of explosive burned into cloth. It always felt like the first time, and the 100th. Elias stepped into the doorway, the narrow end of the funnel. He wore a vest with 3 permanent stains. He touched shoulders, lifted jaws, listened to breathing, checked pupils, stripped sleeves back to find pulses. The tags on his finger looped faster than he could read. "U, red." He wheeled a man with froth in his mouth toward Kira, who was already holding a bag valve mask like an extra lung. "U, yellow." He pressed lips to a forehead, not a kiss, just a way to get close enough to smell infection and fear. "U, green." A boy with eyes too old tried to stand and failed. "U, black," he whispered once to a child whose chest had stopped and refused to return even when his hands argued with it. He wrote expectant and hated himself for the correctness of it. Across the room, Padre Utley knelt by a man gasping and said nothing out loud. Prayer looks like silence when time collapses. Caldwell's radio was a chain of words wrapped around panic. "We're at capacity. Air inbound with 2 urgent surgical. 1 field crick. Blood 8 units. Repeat, 8. Released." The clock on the wall ticked to 2:11. Caldwell's fingers were steady. He turned the valve. Oxygen pressure dipped, equalized, held. Nothing happened. The ward exhaled as one body. Maybe the call had been a cruel trick. Maybe they had broken a rule for nothing. At 2:12, the night slammed its palm against the outside wall. A concussive blast ate the air and spit it back. Lights flickered to their backup, then found themselves again. A ceiling tile fell in B-Wing, bounced once angrily, and lay still. Sparks kissed a linen cart and found nothing to love. A small flower of fire burned and died under a blanket in 20 seconds because oxygen was not hungry. Caldwell exhaled a prayer into his pocket and did not admit it. Hendricks did the math of what if and did not put it on anyone's face. Rosen shouted for a clamp and got one before the syllable had settled. And even then, the night wasn't done with the cruel math of who gets what when. In the shuffle after the blast, the black-tagged boy was rolled under a gurney and dragged 2 feet by a panicked wheel. Elias found him by his shirt, the green cloth already slick. He wanted to change the past 3 minutes by force. He wanted to violate everything he knew to be true about triage and say, "Not this one." He lifted the boy's head, and the boy whispered "mother" in a language Elias had never learned and instantly understood. "We move him," Kira said, samurai calm. "He was black. He is red now. The world is unfair. We fight it when we can." They fought in a dirty corner that became the entire world for 6 minutes. They breathed for him and pressed and cursed and begged without words. The numbers tightened, loosened, tightened again. Elias marked the boy's wrists with a cleaner tape and wrote Hamid red. He did not know if it was his name. He needed him to have one. In the crush, they lost him once. They got him back. They watched him try leaving, like someone trying a new door and coming back, unsure if the hallway beyond was better. Jenna's voice arrived at 3:04, like someone had finally found the right frequency. "Elias," she said. He knew it at once. He knew it in the skin along his arms, and in the name he had not said aloud in months. Kira looked sharply over. Elias put the phone to his ear, as if any other movement would break something breakable. He didn't use words he didn't need to. In war, economy is mercy. "Yes, you're busy," she said, humor flickering at the edges like a wick. "I'll be quick. Oxygen, you did what I asked. Good. There's one more thing. There's a boy under a bed. He's made a nest there like small animals do when the earth becomes stupid. Room 19. You need to fetch him. They won't. They can't. He's in a later they can't see. You can." "I can't," Elias said. He saw Hamid in front of him, red tagged, held by a thread. "Yes, you can," she said, old authority back for a minute. "Also, there's a captain inbound with a bleeding leg and a way of taking up space with his rank. Rosen will hesitate. He shouldn't. There is not enough O negative for everything. Give it to the boy in bed 4 with the quiet eyes and the blood in his belly. Tell Rosen to grow a spine the way he does and stop pretending he doesn't have one." Silence replaced her voice the way ocean replaces a boat. Elias stood with the handset pressed to his ear long after logic suggested he hang up. He set it down with the kind of care that feels like superstition, because maybe it is. Kira was already by the utility closet when he found her. They did not speak. They did not need to. They slipped through the cold into a room that smelled of metal and old decisions, and the game of hide-and-seek that war plays with the living and the dead resumed. They found the boy under a bed because they expected to. He had curled as if the floor had lifted him and placed him there gently. He had hollowed out a space where breath could pile up without being stolen by anyone else. He whimpered when Elias's hand found his shirt. Kira hauled Elias by his belt, and together they unstitched him from his hiding place. He had the look of someone who had decided to survive and needed the world to go along with it. They brought him back into the present like contraband. Hendricks saw them and rotated the whole machine toward him without losing rhythm. Rosen cut in Theater 1 and talked to himself like anyone else might listen. He ran out of words and then got more. He slid from one life to another with a confidence that was not his, and used it anyway. Back in triage, a captain with blood browning at his thigh demanded attention with a practiced ease. He bled loudly. He threatened to faint in a way that would cause havoc. He did not try to be a bully. He didn't need to. The room made room for men like him, whether it should or not. Rosen looked at Elias. We have 2 units O negative left until supply comes. The captain needs it. Bed 4 needs it more. 1 can wait. Bed 4 gets it, Elias said. The captain can wait for 30 minutes. The boy cannot. Rosen hesitated. It looked like a man glancing down a long drop before stepping anyway. Do it, he said. If anyone asks, I will take the yelling. Padre Utley drifted near the doorway, the way he did when decisions needed a witness and no one asked for one out loud. He tapped his thumb against his index finger in a quiet, even rhythm, matching the pulse only he could feel in the room. They hung blood on bed 4. The numbers on the monitor, which had been sulking and threatening to do something dramatic, decided to trust the living for another hour. The captain watched and swallowed his frustration like a man with manners, which he turned out to have when it mattered. Caldwell came back from the yard with the smell of hot metal on his clothes. He swore at the sky with a creativity that resisted repetition. He checked his radio battery like it was a prayer bead. He listened to an inbound rotor wash and called the time on it with the accuracy of someone who knows sound. They ran. The clock softened and hardened in alternating waves. Triage beat a rhythm that held time even when it wanted to refuse. Elias's hands did not stop. He made 100 small choices that stacked neatly into lives. He promised where it wouldn't kill anyone else to say it. He told the truth and hated himself for the places where it felt like cruelty. He wrote names down because names make bodies into people and people into tasks you are not allowed to fail. Between waves, he found the nurse's station as if the building had shifted slightly to make it closer. He drank coffee that had cooled into a liquid you consume because it promises what it cannot deliver. Kira leaned on the other end of the counter, her eyes rimmed in red and as sharp as ever. They watched each other the way divers watch partners. You okay? Yes. How much air? Enough. Elias's gaze kept dragging back down the corridor, to the utility closet, to the seam in the world that had given up and let him in. He didn't like that he wanted it. He didn't like that he could feel the room waiting like a dog at a door. He didn't want to name what that made him. The phone did not ring again for a while. When it did, it was as gentle as a tap on a shoulder. He answered. He didn't say hello. Thought that would be it, Jenna said. He could hear the grin that always came at the end of a wry thought. He wanted to tell her things. He wanted to say the mundane words. He settled for breath. There's always one more, she said. You know that. Go back. There's a man who wants to make a decision and needs you to let him. Go now, before Rosen thinks of a reason to stop you. He looked up. Rosen was stepping out of Theater 1, his hands dangling in air like he had mislaid a thought. Their eyes met. Rosen nodded toward the back corridor without looking at it, as if it had always been there, and he had always approved of it. He might never even know he had done so. Kira fell into step with Elias, their strides matched by habit. Time did the strange dilation that makes corridors longer and shorter in alternating beats. They were not tired anymore. They were entirely tired, their bodies convinced iron lived in their blood. Room 19 waited. The window that shouldn't exist showed pre-dawn as a smear of pale in a sky no one had claimed. A man in an American uniform sat on the bed closest to it. He was older than most, late 30s, a captain's bars bent at the corner. His left leg lay at an angle that denied anatomy's desires. His face had the specific calm of a person pushing pain aside by will, and making room for other things. "Hey," Elias said. "Hey," the man said back. He looked at Kira and smiled, crooked and tired. "You look like you know the ending." "I don't," Kira said. "Not tonight." The captain gestured at his leg. "I can make this worse and be a priority. Or I can sit here and be a yellow with too much pride. There's blood to spend. It's yours to spend. I can take pain." "Don't do that to us," Elias said. His voice was flat, stripped of the ornament of anything but truth. "Don't absolve us and call it a favor. It's not bravery we need. It's trust." The man smiled again, a little broader. "Someone told me once that at 3 in the morning, what you do makes rings you'll step in later." She had hair that never obeyed her, and a laugh like she'd tried not to laugh and failed. "Jenna," Elias said before he could stop himself. "Jenna," the captain echoed, like a man testing a bridge to see if it would hold. "She stitched my head in a tent once. I gave her hell for the way she tied the knot. She told me to show up when the world needed someone to be less special so the right person could be more alive." He could simply have asked for pain medicine. He could have demanded more. He had chosen to ask for permission to do a hard thing. The room waited on the answer. Kira stepped close and placed a hand on his shoulder, like a promise that could be kept. "We're going to get you through without stealing from anyone who can't afford to be robbed." Elias nodded. He had needed to say no to something, and this was the right thing to say it to. It felt like setting a bone. They treated him, morphine measured, bandaged tight in a way that felt like competence rather than neglect. Pressure held where it didn't harm anything else. He closed his eyes and breathed. He wasn't a saint. He hurt. He chose it anyway. In the doorway, shapes gathered the way breath does before a sentence. The Soviet orderly lifted a hand, a gesture somewhere between salute and farewell. An Afghan man in a faded kameez stood behind him, his palm raised, eyes on the boy down the hall, who now lay in Bay 3, breathing like a person who had decided to make it to sunrise. A British corporal in a dusty polo with a worn patch that had once been crisp leaned against the frame and said, "Well then." It sounded like punctuation. Jenna appeared with the same quiet ease with which she had moved through the ward in life. Not a trick of light, not a melodrama. She was there like a fact. She put her hand on the doorframe and smiled. And the smile knocked the wind out of Elias with simple force. "You did good," she said. He bristled because he was tired and angry that he needed her blessing like a kid. "I don't need that." "You do," she said, amused and loving in the way she had been when she handed him a task he wasn't sure he wanted. "Not every day. Enough. Also, move my badge. You've been hogging the ritual. Let someone else hang something that hurts them in a way that helps them." He wanted to say 1,000 things. He managed none. His throat was crowded with gratitude and rage that belonged to old nights and new. "Close the door now," she said. "Not forever, just for now. It'll open when it wants to. You don't get to control that. You get to control hands, breath, decisions, coffee. Do those." He put his hand on the handle. It was cold as the first time. The room exhaled as metal met metal. He closed the door. Climax. The corridor's air warmed as they stepped out. The world traveled back from the strange geography of 19 to the flex and hum of generators and a floor that had been mopped within the last decade. Elias felt clarity arrive in his mind like a wash of clean water. It didn't fix anything. It made the next things possible. He took 2 steps, and the building resumed its list of demands. In Theater 1, Rosen's voice lifted into a steady cadence as he narrated his own hands. Clamp, Suction. That's it. No. Lower. There. The chest he'd opened subsided into an order it had not previously enjoyed. In Bay 3, Hamid's numbers tightened. His breath moved from argument into truce. In the corridor, Padre Utley leaned his head back and stared at the fluorescent fixture like he could see a star in it no one else had noticed. Elias returned to the nurse's station to find Hendricks assembling a story that could be told in a report. She looked up, eyebrows raised. "Well, later," he said. He didn't have room for it now. He would. The night would insist. The clock said 4:12. The sun whispered around the edges of the horizon. The base's loudspeakers were quiet, the way they get just before someone uses them and breaks a silence everyone had been living in without noticing. They had one more emergency, the kind of petty rebellion the universe offers when it wants to humble you into thinking ordinary things still exist. A private with a bad laceration and a worse attitude tried to leave. Caldwell boxed him back in using words that were half profanity and half reassurance. Kira laughed out loud for the first time, a sound that bent her shoulders just a fraction and put color back into her face. Then the ward softened, the kind of soft that felt like it might be trusted if you were brave. Elias walked to Bay 3. He put his hand on the metal rail at the foot of Hamid's bed. Hamid's lashes trembled. He dreamed. Oxygen ticked. The green tracings on the monitor had settled into a script that, while messy, could be read. Elias talked because that is one of the few miracles that belongs to all nights. To say something ordinary into a place that devours extraordinary things. He told the boy about a pecan tree in a yard in San Antonio that dropped nuts onto the roof like hail in summer storms. He described a kitchen that always had a bowl of fruit in it, oranges like small suns, bananas that were gone faster than logic dictated. He made a world that had nothing to do with this one and offered it like bread. Behind him, Rosen stood at the doorway with a face that had given away a lot tonight and still had more to give. He started to speak. He didn't. He waited. He understood that there are moments when silence is the most expensive and therefore the most valuable thing you can spend. When he did speak, he used the words he had left wisely. "You made calls," he said quietly. "Good ones. I can't write them all down, but I can remember them. I will do that." Elias nodded. He didn't need praise. He needed the assurance that if he forgot tonight to save himself, someone else would hold it without dropping it. The captain, with the leg, smiled an hour later when the blood finally reached him. He said, "Cheers," with a British vowel that didn't belong in his mouth, and made Kira snort. He drifted into sleep, a man satisfied with the shape of his pain. Kira went to the tiny chapel and sat with Padre Utley in the kind of quiet that has nothing to do with words. Padre handed her a cup of tea. She took it because tea is faster than absolution, and sometimes better. Hendricks sat at a desk and turned the night into narrative. She wrote, "Oxygen valve B wing closed at 0211 due to suspected anomaly." She wrote, 12 casualties received, 4 urgent surgical, 1 expectant. She did not write, "The building remembered and interfered." You don't put that in an official report. You keep it in your pocket and deploy it when the next night threatens to become a legend with no witnesses. Caldwell walked out to the antenna array and put a hand on a metal pole like a man consecrating something. He swore at the horizon and then thanked it, in case anyone there was keeping score. Elias went to his locker and found Jenna's badge where he had left it months earlier to watch him come and go. He lifted it. The cracked plastic caught the early light like the laugh she'd carried with her, even when she was tired. He stuck it in the pocket of his scrub top. He'd move it later, the way she had told him to. He didn't have to do every ritual at once. He had learned that much. He walked to B-Wing and placed his palm on a soot mark that ended half an arm's length down the wall, as if someone had drawn a hard line and told fire to square itself to it. He knew it would be warm in the heat and cool in the night, and that this meant nothing and everything. He bowed his head, not in worship, but because he had run far and felt his legs. Kira, in the pharmacy, made a list of things that had somehow gone missing in the night's accounting. She wrote, 1 decompression needle. She left a single asterisk next to it, and in the margin, amusement winning a small fight with exhaustion, scribbled, charged to room 19. The phone at the nurse's station sat like any other tool. Its screen was still 3 minutes off. No one fixed it. The drift felt appropriate. The day shift would arrive and sit on the edge of the night's stories, like someone on a pier with their feet just above the water. The world would resume the pretense of linear events and rational causality. Until it didn't. Because nights like this return. Resolution. Dawn climbed the cinder block walls carefully, as if trying not to wake anyone who didn't need to be woken. The base beyond the hospital's glass yawned and stretched its routines back onto its bones. Forklifts coughed. Trailers hummed. Someone hit a trash can with a lid and cursed the universe for existing. The sun threaded pale gold through dust and turned everything into an old photograph for a second. Elias's body blew its last reserves and kept going out of spite. He made another round. He hung another bag of fluid. He checked a chest tube as if it were a baby you had to pay attention to, or it would sneak out. He counted units of blood and units of luck, and found sometimes the numbers add in ways that defy math. Hamid held. The air around his bed was the tense kind of quiet you don't poke with a stick. The nurses took turns pretending not to stare. The numbers formed an uneasy coalition with survival. Elias stood at his foot and breathed along with him for a minute. He lifted his eyes and saw the invisible thread that sometimes links what you can do and what you cannot, and felt grateful that tonight it had been long enough. Hendricks walked the scorched hallway of B-Wing and took photographs to put into a file that would sit on a hard drive for years. She captioned them with the bureaucratic calm of a woman who had learned to tell the truth, in tones that let the truth get in the door. Later, when no one was watching, she touched the line where the scorch stopped and thought, "Thank you, whoever you are." Rosen found himself by the welded door at the end of the back corridor. He put his palm on it, as if warming it. He didn't believe, not really. He believed in his hands, in clamps, in the ugly beauty of a beating heart that doesn't want to stop. And yet, when he stood there, he felt the door like a shoulder under a blanket. He had no plan for that thought. He took it with him and did not show it to anyone. Padre Utley cleaned the brass plate as if polishing the names could keep them from smearing into something no one could read. He said both names out loud. He added the boy's name in a whisper, as if he could loan it to him until he woke and took it back for himself. He put a tea bag into a cup and left it at the nurse's station, because sometimes tiny things open larger doors. Caldwell checked the screws on the radio rack and found one loose, tightened it with his nails and a prayer. He looked at Elias and shook his head minutely, like an animal after rain. "If that bastard rings again," he said, "I'm going to stick gum in its mouth." "If it tells you to turn off the oxygen again," Elias said, "chew the gum first." Kira held a chart and looked at her crooked handwriting and tried to smooth it with her eyes. She let her shoulders drop a centimeter. She sat suddenly in a chair no one had claimed. She put her head back and looked at the ceiling, where the paint had yellowed in a circle, as if someone had once hung a lamp there, and it was removed by an invisible hand. She closed her eyes and let herself drift. She didn't sleep. She learned the shapes her exhaustion made and filed them for later. Elias went to the medroom. The hook by the door was empty. He pulled Jenna's badge out of his pocket and held it. He thought of mailing it to her parents, of sending it home to himself in a month, of keeping it, of burning it, of swallowing it like a reliquary. He did none of those things. He put it in a small box with his triage tags, and the coin Padre had pressed into his palm the day he'd not cried over a child and wanted to. He found himself suddenly by the utility closet because some parts of the hospital had begun to be closer to him than before. He opened it. The mop leaned. The shelves held buckets like patient soldiers. The shadow ate light politely, like a guest who knew how to be in a room. He touched the cool of it with his fingertips and withdrew. He understood the fear that if he went through now, he might go looking for things he should not go looking for. He shut the door. He stepped back into the ward and bled into the morning with everyone else. The day shift came in with fresh faces and stale jokes. The brief was a litany and a confession. Hendricks summarized with grace. She assigned with mercy. Rosen disappeared into Theater 2 with a man who insisted on living. The base made day noises again. Elias stood next to Caldwell at the nurse's station. The phone sat in its cradle like a tool. Caldwell squinted at it, like an animal that has learned to distrust stillness. "Think it'll ring again?" Caldwell asked. "Yes," Elias said. "Maybe not today. Maybe not for us." "You going to answer?" "If it's mine," Elias said. "If it's yours, you answer." "Hard pass," Caldwell said, and then smiled, because the night had given him permission to joke without sourness. Elias glanced down the corridor and felt the building like a person in the room with you, quiet and present and not done with you. He didn't resent it. He didn't love it. He stored it somewhere under his ribs where the things that are true live when you can't afford to think about them all the time. He made another round. He signed something someone had left for him to sign. He pressed his hand briefly to the warm foot of a bed, because skin is the oldest language in the world, and people hear it without having to try. The world resumed its pretense of order. He decided to let it keep the pretense for now. War bends time. It sharpens certain hours until they cut, and it stretches others until they hum with something like grace. In a concrete building in the desert, a phone rang from a room no one had counted. A voice from another year told a man in this one where to put his hand and when to turn a valve. The edge of fire stopped where a line had been drawn in breath and warning. A boy who would have been a name on a list became a person asleep because someone listened to a call that could not have come. Some rooms exist and some rooms insist. They don't wait for belief. They open when need finds the seam and pushes, and then they close when the work is done, and they leave you with decisions you have to own. Another night will come. Another call will find someone's ear. That person will stand where two maps overlap and choose. They will hate it. They will be grateful. They will save someone they will never meet again, because a voice that shouldn't have been there told them the time. Until then, keep your hands ready. Keep your breath steady. Keep your valves in mind and your badges where they belong. And when the phone rings from a room that isn't there, answer.